All right. So great to see everybody and welcome. So here we go. I'm Alexandra Kapelos-Peters, CEO and founder of Cansulta, and I'm so happy that you're here with us today. So we're gonna go ahead and dive right in. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded, although of course it's always better live. You will receive access to the slides and the recording by email. Probably it'll take us a couple days, so within the next week. And yes, you are welcome to share any of the materials with other folks who you think will benefit. So what today's going to look like? Unfortunately, we won't be able to take individual questions today. We've just got too much good content to go through. But if you do have any questions about the content you see on the screen, just drop a little note in the chat and we'll be sure to check that out and ask the presenter to clarify if they can. So what do you do if you have questions about the content and how it relates to you and your organization? Well, we'll talk about that a bit later, but what we really want you to do is book a free call with any of our experts to discuss your particular organization and situation. So just briefly, what is today going to look like? We have a great plan, packed agenda for the next hour. I'll try to keep my part short so that we can focus on hearing from these teammates here. And so brief introduction, we're going to hear from Naomi talk about the change catalyst and change leadership and communications. Then Nikhil's going to talk to us about AI pace. And finally, Brandy is going to discuss retention reset. So turnover, attrition, all those good topics. Finally, we're going to have a brief conversation with how these are relevant to you and your companies. And then we'll wrap it up within the hour. All right, so I just want to briefly introduce kind of how we got here today. So, for what purpose did all this kind of come about? The problem that we have been trying to solve for at Cansulta. And so for those of you who have ever tried to or have engaged a consulting firm, even a great one, you know how this goes already. There's a scoping phase, there's a proposal, there's a lot of back and forth on a statement of work. It can be 6 weeks, 8 weeks before anyone actually starts working on your problem. And then by the time that the actual engagement wraps up, well, the problem has already often changed its shape. So the people who were going to implement the recommendations and the solutions, they might have moved on. And this urgent problem, well, it's probably already exploded, or maybe it's quietly disappeared and been deprioritized. So, we notice that really today's consulting model, it's not fully broken, but it wasn't built for the speed at which all of today's business problems actually take place in reality. And so that's why we built the C-list. It's, the typical story. We thought there had to be a better way. So that's what we're here for. The C-list is meant to be faster to get moving, faster to start, more specific in its scope, and with senior people who've been there and done that, not juniors, not associates, doing the actual work. So the C-list is our new suite of consulting solutions. Each one of them is built around a very specific recurring business problem. So we diagnose and scope and deliver with a senior consultant that solution within a defined time frame, which is a bit different. So what that means in practice is that you don't have to pay for a long-winded discovery phase that goes on forever. You don't get handed off to someone junior. You get a consultant who has actually solved this problem before, working with you for 3 to 4 weeks and leaving you with something concrete, a plan, a framework, a set of actions, something that you can actually execute within your company and organization. So we will be updating our C-list every quarter, and today's brief is our Q2 2026 edition. And so today we're going to cover the top 3 issues that our consultants and that we are seeing as most pressing, urgent, expensive, and relevant inside today's organizations. Last slide, I promise, and then we'll dive into the meat that you want to hear. So, how does this all work? Well, we're a little bit unconventional. So we have a new set of solutions. Our programs here are designed with three different tiers. We have a Compass tier, which gives you our own tools, plus some advisory. So that's great if you have a very capable internal team and you just need some help from an expert to provide the direction and accountability without really outsourcing any of the work. So that's our Compass tier. Then we have our Sprint, which is something pretty new and exciting for us, and that's done with you. So that's where your team and the consultant will work together very intensively in a 3 to 4 week period to actually execute and complete the work. And then finally, the program level is a done for you solution where the consultant will really take ownership of the problem and all of the outputs there, and you will be kind of steering and reviewing. So today you're going to hear from three specialists and one for each of these key tracks that we're actively featuring this quarter. And they're going to walk you through and walk us through the problem that they specialize in, what that looks like, what it costs, and then what a fix would actually look like as well. Quick introductions, and we'll dive in. So a little background for our speakers. Naomi Aili, who's going to kick us off, is a change leadership and communications expert. She works with organizations navigating significant transitions, including restructuring, system changes, leadership shifts, and helps organizations move through change without losing the trust of their teams. And Naomi leads our Change Catalyst track. Nikhil Vimal is an AI strategy and adoption consultant. He works with leadership teams to move from AI experimentation to real measurable business value. And he's leading our AI PACE program. And finally, we have Brandy Zimmerman, who is a senior HR and people strategy consultant. And Brandy specializes in retention, workplace performance, and what happens when organizations start losing people that they can't afford to lose. And Brandy leads our retention reset program. All right, so we're going to finally dive in. Enough from me, and let's dive in and over to Naomi.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alex. So I want to talk about a different lens in terms of how we're looking at change and communication specifically, and how to de-risk your transformation. So the absence of one key resource at your executive table could be quietly costing you far more than you realize. You're planning a major change, a restructuring, system overhaul, new way of working, something that's going to consume time, money, energy, resources. You call your meeting, your executive meeting, finance is there, ops, legal, HR, tech, every critical function is represented, but one may not be at the table. And I'm talking about communications. So we advance to the next slide. Thank you for your support with that. Thank you. So at what point, key question, at what point does communication usually get brought in? If we had time for more interactivity, I would pose, enter your answer in the chat. But typically when we look at a process or path, and as shown here, this is high level for illustrative purposes. So we have a trigger, business case, approval, project initiation, implementation, announcement, rollout, adoption, etc. At what point in this process, in this path, is communications typically brought in? Okay, next slide. So typically in most organizations, it's somewhere here around project initiation or implementation planning. And that might actually feel early. And yes, some communications professionals have really fought for this early engagement. By project standards, early engagement. The change is effectively decided and then handed over to the project, over to communications. My thesis today, my argument, that's the gap. And that gap is where risk enters. Here's how to recognize that risk in terms of, let's call them warning signs. So think of this in two buckets, external and internal. So for external, you're going to look at your data, historical data in two categories, external and internal. External, it's were there any reputational risks as a result of former changes? Take a look at your NPS score, your Net Promoter Score. What is that score looking at in terms of trending? What were customers saying as it related to previous change? And then internally, you're going to look at your internal data. So these are key points such as your employee survey results. What was the engagement score? what were they saying? So what were the common themes that were collected as it relates to managers as communicators and communication itself as it relates to engagement? And then look at your HR data. What is the attrition telling you? What is the story here? What reasons are people citing for leaving? Interesting research point. Research tells us poor internal communication is one of the top 5 reasons. Number 1 is pay, there's managers, etc., but it's one of the top 5 reasons. And then you're going to look at your transformational PIR, your post-implementation review, your reports. Were the objectives met? Were there benefits realization? Was communication effective? Now, if any of these data points are taking you back a little bit, if you're not measuring these things, there's an opportunity as well. So then there's the behavioral signs, right? Executives describe the change differently. Feedback from leaders and key stakeholders that they should have been told earlier, brought in earlier. Managers go quiet. The same questions resurface even after they were addressed. So these are typically your signs of resistance. Next slide, please. But resistance is not the real risk. Think of this in 3 layers: the presenting problem, the underlying issue, and the root cause. So the presenting problem at the surface that we all want to focus on, of course, is, well, people are resisting the change. The core issue, the issue behind that, the change is not being adopted as intended. There are gaps, there's rework, and there's stalled rollouts. But really, what is at the root of this issue and presenting problem? Communication was not part of the decision. So communications leader is typically engaged to craft the message, to put the announcement together, communication strategy, the plan, etc., but not to pressure test the decision. And I'm going to emphasize those words, not to pressure test the decision. Very different things. Writing a message, pressure testing. So when the leader isn't part of the business decision, should we go forward with this change, early, no one is asking about strategic communications risks. Next slide, please. And the data reflects how consistently this gap shows up. This is a recent stat. 61% of organizations have no formal change communications approach. And while 73% of communications leaders want to operate as strategic advisors, only 18% say they actually do. 32% of leaders say their last change achieved healthy adoption. 32 is strikingly low. You may be familiar with the opposite of that, which is 70%. Now, only 10% of the project budget, not even 10% of the project budget, goes to the people side of change, when that benchmark should actually be between 15 to 25, according to Prochet. Next slide, please. So we're presented with 2 risks, really, right? Late involvement and low investment. Late involvement, low investment together are drivers of change failure. Now, the 3 figures you see here, so again, for illustrative purposes only, these 3 figures are the financial expression of how these risks hit your business. Now, these are mid-market, a mid-market example illustrated here. So late involvement shows up as productivity drag. Underfunding rather shows up as turnover, resistance, and project overturn. And these are just some figures. Again, mid-size organization, illustrative purposes only. There are calculators actually available for you specifically to input your numbers. And we also at Cansulta have calculators as well related to each of these tracks today. Next slide, please. So the fix. So the fix is a seat at the table, essentially, to pressure test the decision at the very onset. And I've highlighted here the trigger. So whatever that trigger may be, it's brought to the business. This is what we need to say. The communications leader needs to be at that table, partaking in that decision. Now, there's 3 action steps here I'll highlight. Early involvement, so discuss the communication risks along with your financial, legal, operational, and people risks before approval. And I'll get into some clear questions you can ask in support of this first action step. Second, increase the investment, allocate accordingly, fund the capability, own it, time and budget. And then measure, I alluded, if you didn't have those earlier data points I reflected on, it's important to have that measure because then you can have a proactive approach to tracking any kind of early detection signs as you're tracking adoption. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are 10 questions to ask before you green light any change. And I'll just go through these quickly, but you can take a screenshot of this if you'd like. So change load. What else are we asking the audience to absorb? What is the capacity for more change? Yes, these are communications questions. Current sentiment. What does our most recent employee data tell us? Historical narrative. What have we already said? What have we already said? That's very, very important, publicly or internally, that this could contradict. The people risks. Is it in the best interest of our people? What will it cost? Manager readiness. Downstream implications. Downstream implications. What consequences haven't been surfaced? Who is impacted and can we engage them early? And then, of course, we want to look at reputation and brand. Does this align with our values? Does this align with our values? External narrative. Could this become a public story? So here we're being preemptive, proactive. Disclosure boundaries, and then, of course, timing and sequencing. Of course, we have to ask, is now the right time? Given all of this, is now the right time? What conditions should we delay, phase, or redesign? So those are some key questions for you to take away. Now, if a communications role doesn't exist in your organization, the questions still have to. Someone must own communication risk in that room, internally or an outside advisor, to pressure test the decision before it moves forward. Next slide, please. So to wrap up, communication deserves a seat at the table from the start of transformation, not as a support function that translates decisions. So I'd like you to think of this as the equivalent of hiring an architect after the building has been framed, and then being surprised when the structure doesn't hold. So organizations that manage change most effectively recognize communication not as a support function, but as a strategic capability, one that contributes to the business decision behind the change, and then how that change is understood, accepted, and implemented. Thank you. I think we're moving on to...
Thank you so much, Naomi. That's
Thank you.
great. All right, we are going to take a look at the questions to follow up later, and now we're going to hand it off to Nikhil.
Awesome. I'm just setting up my share screen really quickly. One moment here. See if that works. Okay, it is visible, right? Sweet. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nikhil Vimal, and I am running the AI PACE program here at Cansulta. And I'm very, very excited to share a little bit about what that means, look at the industry a little bit, and in very similar fashion to Naomi, kind of break down the different sort of stages that you have to follow to adopt AI successfully into your organization, or at least as the precursor, right? The program takes you a little bit more in depth, but we're going to look at a high level look today. So let's start off that. So AI PACE, again, the problem, the cost, the fix. That's sort of the breakdown of the sort of exercise here. And the way that I want everyone to think about this is that essentially, AI is a type of technology and a type of methodology that everyone wants to use right now. But even now that we're about 4 years into this really big generative AI boom. Obviously, it's been around since the 1960s, I think. But really, the way that AI is going right now and the way that it's been in this current sort of big boom is the last 4 years. And we're starting to see the first cracks in the foundation and the first real results of experimentation at this point. And at Cansulta, I think it's important. We find it important to share that while it is very tempting to just jump in and get going, there are actual problems and costs and things that need to be fixed, even around AI or even around how organizations work, which leads me to my first major sort of problem, I guess, which is that the value of AI comes from rewiring how companies run. There's a lot of talk. Obviously, it requires a rewiring of data. It requires rewiring of potentially how money is spent and how people are hired and all these other things. But it's fundamentally looking at how companies run. And this is an interesting study from McKinsey because they did look at small business. They looked at startups, looked at mid-size, looked at enterprise, looked at every single industry. And fundamentally, no one is getting the real value of AI and the real returns they're looking for without fundamental understanding that it's not a band-aid solution. It's not something you can just slap on. It is actually a rewiring. And I'm going to go in a second here on why that's even some stats to back it up. But I think that's like the mindset that I'd like to, invoke to start this whole conversation off, is that it's very valuable. If you're using it day to day, if you're using it as a new form of search, like it is very instant. It's very individually valuable. Like we find very quick uses of AI and how it could help us with our work, with little things that we do. But when it comes to streamlining and bringing it together at an organization, that's what the AI pace is about. It's literally about setting the pace and the standard to not necessarily jump to be the first to use AI as much as possible and produce as much as you can. It's actually to do it with intention, with some level of clarity, and not necessarily go slower, just at a better pace. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I do want to talk about the proof points of that. I want to talk about how this problem has been manifesting in different ways, and also where it's working too, right? So there's a bit of a sliding spectrum, as with any innovation. For example, one of the biggest, I think, from Better Up Labs, but they actually took from the McKinsey report and from a lot of the reports just a couple months ago, they found that there was roughly 6 hours a week of human rework and cleaning up AI agent mistakes when adoption is rushed. So they literally asked people how quick they integrated agentic AI, and discover that, it's actually almost a full workday per week. This is for managers. This is for associates. This is for any level in the company. If there's a project, there's a team working on something, there are potentially multiple members on that team using up almost a full workday to go back and take care of what might be called slop in certain spaces, right? I think the term that McKinsey used a little bit was like work slop, where it's just producing, but it doesn't say much. It's just something for the sake of using AI, right? So that's already one big thing. And then this is a shocking stat, which I think has actually gone down a little bit, but it's heavily contested right now. 95% of enterprise AI pilots, and actually extended out to mid-market now too, after some years of research, deliver no measurable bottom line impact, which is very shocking because, again, I think it's just the way that you have to look at AI, where it's not, if you're building AI or like AI for organizations or all your customers and you're just trying to push it out as quick as possible, there isn't really measurable bottom line impact, maybe for your day to day, but that doesn't equate to proper efficiency. And so I think the number is down to 90%. I think it's gone down a smidge because of agentic work, but it is important to mention that this number is still thrown around a lot and is something that we at Cansulta have actually sort of seen in the real world too. 60 to 73% is the general range and average range of AI agentic project failures due to data quality issues. So this is the concept of I've heard this term a lot and I use it, and I think we at Cansulta champion it a lot, is bad data in, bad data out, good data in, better data out. So it's really bad data in, worse data out, I should say, where AI is a compounding factor. It's a multiplier for work, for productivity. And if you're giving it data that's incorrect, it's going to double down because it's convinced that, okay, well, you're giving me something that you've checked and validated. But again, similar to that earlier thing with the rework, if you're not doing that cleanup, you're in that 73% range, right? And this was a report done again by Capgemini, but in collaboration with a lot of major organizations and enterprises, and again, even mid-market startups as well. And then, another major knowledge worker survey basically said that 8.8 hours per week are wasted by workers manually gathering data that AI should surface. So it's even a connectivity issue too. But I do want to share it's not all bad, right? Those are just some of the major things that people tend to glare over a little bit, or gloss over rather, and that need to be mentioned. But in manufacturing, for example, there's a 77% adoption rate of AI right now. In nonprofits, it's 92% adoption rate. Tech, obviously, the software engineering world has been shaken up a little bit. And then with legal, there's real strategy, right? Real intentional usage of AI leads to 2x revenue growth. And a lot of industries are seeing it, but similar to nonprofits, and even even in tech, which is like where AI is coming from, there's org level velocity. So people up the chain are not really necessarily making decisions faster. At nonprofits, there's a big issue where they're using AI but don't really know how to use it. In supply chain, there's manufacturing rather, there was something very similar too, where like there is use cases, there are things going in the right direction, but there's a big learning curve that companies are not adopting and focusing on. And so, yeah, there is a big problem. And it all comes down to, again, rushed projects, trying to get ahead of competitors, trying to be the first to the market. But we got to reframe that a little bit. So the highest values use cases, and these are, again, kind of taken from different studies, from what we see work at Cansulta, and just sort of looking at the industry across multiple different verticals and company sizes. Knowledge assistance, obviously, that's the low-hanging fruit. That is Claude for enterprise or for organizations, and that's your Salesforce having a chatbot now. These are easy for instant answers. These are making sure that you can get, access to data that you need from your analytics tools, and make sure that you can even potentially ask it to take that data and put it somewhere else, right? If you use the Google Suite, you have Gemini move through with you. So obviously, highest value, very quick to see the ROI on, but again, there's nuance to that. Planning support, obviously, like having AI as an assistant to help you with sequencing, scheduling, automation, workflows, fantastic. Quality intelligence, a very, very, very nuanced one, because again, if there's a poor data practice at an organization, then AI actually learns how to spot bad data and again, double down on it rather than try to correct it. So while this is very important, we've also seen issues with security. We've seen, hallucination where AI makes up a policy for a company and ends up breaking the terms of service and causing lawsuits. Like, scary stuff can happen. But in theory, its quality intelligence and its eye for mistakes can be better. It just needs the human touch to get there. And then obviously commercial operations, right? We're talking about support. We're talking about service communication. We're talking about account responsiveness. We're talking about all these different things, sales, right? And all these different roles that come together. And the best fit for the best sort of part of an organization that I think needs to think about the pace and velocity of the AI and even the standards are operations, IT, and just like leadership, period, right? Executive leadership. I think marketing can have a role. I think, going around communications can have a role. Everyone in the company can have a role, but there does need to be clear ownership, and it does need to be, frankly, the sort of major thing that maybe wasn't mentioned as much in the last slide, but as companies are also fragmenting AI more, it also becomes more expensive. And I think it's like 12.9 million on average across companies of multiple sizes. That obviously swings a lot higher for enterprise and a lot lower for startups. But $12.9 million USD per year is lost to just bad data practice in companies already. And that's not even related to AI yet. That's just like bad. That's just bad data, causing issues. So something important to mention there too. The way I want to kind of talk about the fix is I want to share a little bit before we talk about a little bit more about how Cansulta and how we recommend doing it. I do want to share kind of the preparedness checklist, and I'm just using manufacturing as an example here, but this is taking, long-standing innovation practice and adapting it to AI, right? And how you have to look at these different situations to see how your organization is ready to take the next step and move into actually bringing it to the organization. And again, not just slapping it on and letting it run. That includes, it starts with a gap test. So assessing not just the use case, not just the gap, but ownership. Also, where in the company, like, okay, if there are people already using AI in the organization, where is it, right? Have they seen things that we haven't seen yet? Are they already experiencing hallucination data issues, right? And then workflow friction, right? In this case, we're talking about plant and factory operations, but just as a very standard thing when you're tackling anything that, might not be returning ROI, why is that happening? But you have to make sure that you see, again, there has to be ownership. This is an important thing I want to keep stressing. And even an understanding that AI is already here and going. How are the tools you're existing also, like, how are they potentially actually adding more time as well? So looking at AI over engineering as well, that can actually be a friction point too. Then it's selecting a workflow. All right. So you choose, in this case, one real manufacturing workflow to improve. I have some things off to the side: shift handoff, supplier expediting, root cause, like a regulatory prep, schedule exception, like all these different things that go into making a plant and factory run, right? And that's a big use case for this, even robotics when that's worked into this as well. But yeah, what is that workflow after looking at that gap test? And again, having a clear owner who knows where that workflow is and potentially will own how to optimize it. Then a time truth exercise. Okay, so there is a big issue and a perception where AI is just supposed to save time, right? Some amount of time is saved every week on AI. Some amount of time can be saved. All these different companies making big promises. But realistically, where are leaders spending their times with decisions and data? And where is, in this case, where's the floor? Like, it's being realistic, right? It's bringing those two worlds together and actually bringing everything down to earth so that AI is not useful just for like one person in the plant, but it's actually a streamlining operation. So this one's very key as well. And again, why ownership matters. Then even actually figuring out how AI will fit into it. And again, this is to avoid over-engineering. This is to avoid security, right? Where does the regulatory thing come into play? Where does, governance, like, can certain people see information? Will a new AI assistant surface data that people are not supposed to see at different parts of the organization, or it doesn't matter to them, right? So understanding feasibility, safety, understanding, is there a cybersecurity practice? Some major organizations have their own IT that has pre-existing standards. How do these things fit in there? And again, how can ownership and leadership work together in this case too? And then obviously figuring out what is that one metric, figuring out what is that workflow leading to, and then building a 30-day operating plan, which again, the AI PACE program is more attuned in helping set up. But just to kind of go over it, it all should lead up to a sprint. So that's like the that's your pre-workshop to do inside an organization. It's something that one leader do. It's something that a group of leaders, a C-suite can do at a mid-market. It's something that a group of managers can do, right? A team can even do. But now it's like, where do you actually go, right? And so, okay, you found your workflow, and now you have to really audit, again, what kind of tools does it already connect to? We're already using technology. We've already got our, data, our Dropbox, our Google Drive, our databases. Where is AI providing immediate leverage? So figuring that out in week one, and then building off of that, right? Week two, leadership has to interact with the tool itself, and whoever the owner is, they must use the tool. They must read about the limitations, the good and the bad, because that's another key missing piece that we see at Cansulta. And it's very important to mention that without the core understanding of capabilities, it just becomes a rush job, and it becomes a massive opportunity to miss out on real value. Then week three, it's actually fair to say that, okay, we might have found 3 or 4 different leverage points, and it's actually okay to ship or kill and make a decision on, there can't really be an in the middle where we're just going to kind of see what works and try it for a month. Like there should be a set time in the sprint where you decide, okay, these are the friction points. This is where AI provides leverage, and we're going forward. And if there's a few things that feel like they're actually going to add more time, it's best to maybe kill those off a little bit early or defer those to another sprint, so you can really focus on what offers immediate leverage and making that decision. So this is actually, it becomes a decision-making exercise, not necessarily just how to adopt AI. And then obviously week 4, telling the organization what moves, sharing measurable wins once you've got it ready to go, maybe in that last week. And then this just becomes a cycle, right? This can be, a month is just a starting point. It could be a couple months, but again, the whole point of the, sort of the C list is to focus on, not just quarters anymore, but really focusing on moving with the speed of innovation and momentum in the company, and making sure that you are really finding bottom line value that you're looking for. So small, consistent iteration beats the big bang transformations every time. We're seeing that in the industry, as sort of mentioned by those stats earlier. And that's the pivot. That's when you know when to pivot. And that's how you know how to keep momentum, rather than, again, rushing to the top really quickly and hoping to put as much AI into things, only to discover it's actually not saving you money anymore. It's actually costing you, your employees, and even your bottom line. And then after you have those, first 30 days, after you have that checklist, you're seeing 15 to 30% faster workflow execution, which does get higher the more you add to it, right? Manual effort reduced, again, minus 20 to 40%. We're already seeing this across organizations. And there's opportunities for that to get higher, and have people who are focusing on menial tasks focus on actual revenue generating tasks and ideation and, more visionary activities, as they call them, especially at a leadership level. 4 to 8 hours a week recovered. Again, this could be more. It could be, AI has the capability of not only augmenting jobs, but creating new jobs inside of organizations as well, even at the mid-market, even at the enterprise. And then again, back to that ownership, that committee drift gets AI projects every time. We see it at Cansulta. You see it across every single study. The moment there's 30 people trying to all own AI together, you've already kind of lost the race. And even if it's an attempt to get ahead of competitors, even if there's massive budgets thrown at it, that 95% rate is quite alarming of failed AI pilots, right? Your goal is to get to first measurable use cases in 30 days, and you want that to become a system. You want that something that proof, ownership, time back, and then you keep that momentum going. You stick to a pace, you stick to a standard, rather than rushing to the finish line. So that's the AI pace, everyone. And thanks so much for tuning in and learning about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikhil. And we're going to head over to Brandy. Naomi and Nikhil, there are a couple questions in the chat that are better suited to our experts if you want to take a look and reply. And for those of you asking questions, again, we'll encourage you to just book some time, book a meeting, and talk about your situation and get that feedback live with our experts. So, Brandy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy, and I'm the lead for the retention reset track here at the C List. Over our next 10-ish minutes together, I want to give you some genuinely useful stuff that will be helpful for you, whether you end up working with me ever or not. Because who knows? And that's what retention and performance problems actually look like inside organizations, why they persist, what they cost, and something you can do about it before Q3. All right, sound good? Let's go. Okay, here's the real problem. Retention and performance problems rarely arrive with a big warning. They tend to look like an average Tuesday or an average day. It looks like your top performer getting a little bit quieter, maybe a little less involved in meetings. They're still delivering, but not as much as you're used to, right? There's just that little slide and slip, and maybe they're not leaning in or volunteering for stuff as much as they used to. It sometimes looks like a manager who's absorbing the whole team's stress because she doesn't want to pass it up the chain. She's telling herself it'll settle down after this project, but there's always another project that gets in the way. It can also look like an exit interview that surprised the HR team or senior leadership, but honestly didn't surprise anyone on that person's team. The signals were maybe there for months. Someone was disengaged, the workload was too high, manager didn't have the skills to name what was happening or the authority to fix the problem. Here's the thing. These aren't mystery problems. They are familiar patterns. And because they are familiar, they are fixable, especially when we catch them early enough. There we go, sorry. So here's what I want every leader in this room to walk away with today. These signals tend to show up weeks and months before anyone hands in their notice. But the question is whether or not someone's looking for them. So we see things like, and just to be clear, these are not like an exhaustive checklist, and you won't necessarily see each one of them, but these can be some warning signals for you. So we might see a drop in contribution. A person who used to bring ideas to every meeting isn't speaking up as much. They're still delivering on their work, but they're not as invested in improvement. You might also see a slip in output quality. It's not a bad week, but a pattern of it. Absenteeism might be creeping up amongst individuals or perhaps within departments. And this can be especially obvious right after crunch periods or a leadership change. You might also see disconnection from the team. That could look like shorter responses, skipping things that used to matter to them, just being less engaged in the break room or in the hallways or on team meetings. We can also see these two that leaders tend to miss the most. One is managers absorbing pressure without naming it, and teams that have stopped pushing back on workload because when they've tried, it's fallen on deaf ears and nothing has changed. These aren't soft signals. They're measurable, observable, and actionable, but only if you're trained to see them and empowered to name them. Most organizations and most leaders aren't, and that's the root of the problem. I've worked with a lot of organizations on this, and I want to be really clear. The problem is almost never that the leaders don't care. Often they care a lot. It's just that they don't have the tools to solve the problem or they don't know where to start. So these are three patterns that show up over and over that contribute to that lack of tools. One is no shared language for what's happening. Leaders can see the symptoms, but they can't agree on the cause. Is it burnout, a culture problem, a management gap, a communication gap? Without a common framework, everyone's diagnosing a little bit differently, intervening a little differently, and nothing really sticks. We also often see managers promoted for performance, not people or leadership skills. This happens across sector. It is so common. For example, your best engineer becomes your engineering manager. Your top sales rep becomes the sales manager. Someone who's excellent on the manufacturing line becomes a supervisor. They're good at the job. That's why they get promoted. But no one teaches them how to read a struggling team member, how to have a stay conversation before somebody's already decided to leave, or how to escalate a concern without it necessarily becoming a formal HR event. And let's be clear, sometimes it needs to be, but sometimes it doesn't. We also end up with generic solutions for specific problems. We end up trying to fix a problem by treating the symptom or providing coping strategies. So for example, your EAP program, really important to have, but it's not going to fix a workload problem. A pizza party, fun chance for connection, but it's not going to fix a breakdown in trust. And when organizations reach for the wrong tools, we spend some money, we signal that we're trying, but nothing changes. And in the end, that erodes trust much faster than doing nothing. And this is why retention problems persist, even in organizations with the best intention. The intention is there, but the precision and the tackling of the right problem isn't. I also want to be really clear that these problems carry a real cost. I hear leaders say a lot, now's not the time to deal with it. It's not our focus. We just got to get through this work. We got to get this work done. We got to do this thing, got to do this thing. And I get it, right? There's a lot on your plate. And I also want to be clear that waiting carries its own price tag. Replacing a mid-level employee costs between 50 and 200% of their annual salary. That, my friends, is not just your recruiting fee. It also includes the productivity gap while the role is open, your onboarding time getting your new person up to speed and where the other person was at before, and the work that everyone else is absorbing in the meantime, plus the cost of the institutional knowledge that walked out the door when that employee left. An average new hire takes 6 months to reach full productivity. That means you've got 6 months of that gap on top of whatever capacity problem created and contributed to the exit in the first place. And here's one we often forget about, but in my opinion is one that matters a lot. High performers who watch a colleague exit poorly are 2 to 3 more times more likely to follow. Not because they were planning to leave, but because they saw something that told them how this organization treats people under pressure. They saw what happened to their colleague and they have options. So they started considering whether or not staying in your organization is the best choice for them. These are the folks that leave before you're ready and cause the most disruption when they go. Attrition isn't just a headcount problem. It's a performance problem, a momentum problem, and a leadership credibility problem all at once. The cost of waiting isn't neutral, and every month that it sits unaddressed, that gap widens. So I want to share with you 3 moves, including one you can make this week, which is your bonus 4th move. The fix isn't a massive HR transformation. Honestly, it's small shifts, and most organizations need these 3 things. First, diagnose before you act. Workload pressure requires a different response than manager capability gaps, which is different than a breakdown in trust and psychological safety. A mismatched intervention not only wastes money, it further erodes trust and wastes time, making this much worse. So we want to start with the right diagnosis. Equipping your managers is the second. Retention lives at the team level. Managers need specific skills, like how to have a stay conversation, how to read signs of burnout and overwhelm and workload fatigue, how to raise a concern with the staff without turning it into a crisis or making it worse, and how to connect their team to the resources that your organization already has. Third step, we want to build a 30, 60, 90-day and beyond plan, right? We're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping to see what sticks, or throwing pizza parties at the staff and hoping it works. We want to have targeted interventions that have people who own it, timelines for when we're expecting things to get done, and a way to measure whether or not it's working and moving the needle for your team. This isn't a wellness announcement. It's a plan that your team can see and hold you to, that they can see how it's doing. And your first move, the bonus one, I really encourage you to do this week. If you take home one thing from my briefing today, it's this. You don't need approval for this. Just think of one person on your team who's been quietest lately. The one who used to be active, involved, and who's kind of gone a little quiet lately, or maybe just the way they're showing up at work has changed. It's not quite the same as it used to be. Or maybe think about the person whose exit would genuinely be a big problem, who's got really big shoes to fill. I bet you can think of their name right now. Let me give you a moment. Think about who that would be. Who's the person who's either gone quiet or who's going to have that really big impact if they leave? Once you know who it is, I encourage you to book 20 minutes with them this week. Ask them one question. What would need to change in our workplace for it to feel sustainable for you? Also ask, what are some supports that you need to feel like you're able to do your job to your best of your ability? And then I want you to just listen. You're not there to fix the problem. You're not there to defend what's going on or argue whether or not this is a doable change. You're here to listen. And when they tell you what they need, say thank you. That conversation is where the retention work actually starts. And it is the fastest way to find out which lever to pull. Once you have that answer, the clarity call is your next step. And Alex shared the link for that in the chat. That's where we will figure out what you can do to move forward on that one. Back to you, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandy. So I'm going to invite my fellow friends back here. I'm going to hide a few of you for a minute so we can have a little chat. And thank you so much for all those presentations. Hopefully everyone's been enjoying and learning as we go. I see an active chat, so that's great. Thank you so much. All right, first question now, over to you, Naomi. Wanted to see, so for the folks who are here today, the leaders and executives who were able to join us, if they are aware that one of these issues is present in their organization, you know, so you've heard the warning signs and they realize that this is happening, why are, you know, we all not moving forward? What is the hesitation? What's preventing people from taking action to fix these issues today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say that first and foremost, it's not a personal oversight or necessarily that there's hesitation. They may not know what they don't know. So if you've ever heard the expression, you can't read the label from inside the jar. Okay, so similar thinking with that is that they may either be too close or it's not been raised. So typically, when you think about when you experience pain, you don't really do anything about it until it gets to the point where, oh, I got to take an aspirin or whatever, right? A painkiller. But it's there. So it's what I spoke about earlier about the 3 layers, the presenting problem, the issue under that problem, and then the root of it. So it has to be surfaced. Someone has to force the question, if you will, to highlight that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And oftentimes there may not be enough data to support or to make it real. I mean, is communication risk on the P&L, you know, it's when it's brought forward as, hey, this is something critical, it may be too late. So we have to have those conversations earlier. So they may not know what they don't know. They may not have data. So it's not necessarily a hesitation or an oversight. It's just, this might just be the reality, which is more important to bring that lens forward, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. Thank you. My next question is going to be for Brandy. So we want to, what is the warning sign that's going to help tell someone that this is no longer just a problem to monitor and that now it's something that's an urgent issue? It's a problem to kind of tackle today, this quarter. What does that tipping point look like for you?
Yeah, I would say there's 2 things to watch for. One is when we see that shift from an individual level to the manager level. A quiet employee is something to keep an eye on, something to monitor. But when you see a manager that stopped raising concerns about team's workload or stopped asking for help or stopped advocating for their team, that's a strong indicator that your system is under stress and it's not just a person. Another signal to watch for is your high performers. When they start withdrawing, that is a big red flag. The truth of the matter is that most people won't tell you they're thinking of leaving. They'll just start applying for jobs, especially your high performers. So when you start to see them withdrawing, that is a really important sign that you need to start acting, because that is a signal to you that they are starting to shop their resume around. The people with the most options are leaving or considering leaving. That then, you know, that doesn't just cost you their output, which matters a lot, but it also tells everyone else in the organization something about how your organization treats people when things get hard. The last thing I would say is a lot of people don't say they're going to leave before they do. If you happen to be one of the people who gets a warning sign, like an actual, I'm thinking of leaving if this doesn't change conversation, call us right away. Like, you have at most 2 to 3 weeks to start showing that employee some change before they are actually out the door. And so we want to, you know, move fast in those situations. And that's exactly what Retention Reset's designed to help with.
Thanks, Brandy. And then finally, Nikhil, my last question is for you. Can you tell us about the most expensive? I love these, hyperbolic
Mm,
ones. What's
yeah.
the most expensive mistake that you have seen an organization make when they were trying to just take care of this themselves without getting any outside support?
Yeah, yeah. Well, in my specific context, it's assuming that AI is always right. It's probably the most expensive mistake I've ever seen. Where, and again, we're talking about like if you have your all your AI wired up to your databases, to your training data, to all your employees, whatever. You never know what kind of data is going through. You never know what kind of mistakes are being fed around. It's still an early time for this, right? You don't even there's oftentimes I've even seen AI kind of, it says that it's HIPAA compliant, but it will still accidentally, these are scary things to talk about, right? And assuming that the AI kind of knows better, and I've seen this at different levels, and it's not to bash anybody, but I think people get overexcited. I think they get a little bit caught up in the hype, and I think it's extremely, extremely expensive and a massive thing. There's not a lot of ways to like beg for forgiveness with customers. You're already making first, if you're marketing, if you're PR team, if you got all these people, all these go-to-market strategies, and your AI chatbot is telling people something completely wrong or giving them free refunds, I mean, that's on the company, right? That's more than just like an inconvenience. That's lost dollars, that's lost opportunities, and that's what unfortunately rushing often that you just get into the hype. You want to add something as fast as possible, and yeah, I mean, it's like even the whole point of AI pace, I guess, in a sense that we're doing here is that it's already very costly to rush it, but the most expensive mistake, even in all of that, is assuming that it's ready to go, right? It's out of the box because it works great for you when you want to get recipes and other things, and it's very nice and pretty, but that doesn't necessarily mean it results in the things that you're looking for. So just a cautionary sort of tale / way to explain it. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nikhil. All right. Well, I'm going to steal back the screen for a moment here, and we will wrap things up. We're right on time, which almost never happens. So this is quite exciting to me. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what happens next. So if there's something that you heard today that landed for you, so if you kind of recognized in your own organization one or two or three of these descriptions, then the right next step for you is a clarity call. As we said, it's free. It's 20 minutes. It shouldn't take a ton of your time or our consultants. It's really just a conversation and not a pitch. We have lots of stuff on the website that explains more about how all of this works and what it looks like. So just, book a call and chat further. So you're going to talk directly with one of our consultants who leads these tracks that's the most relevant for you. And basically, you'll just have a conversation of if there is a right fit. You would agree on the scope, understand what that looks like. If it makes sense, you can even look at booking a start date to get moving, but there's really no obligation. So the link is, you'll see book a clarity call. Everything is driven here from the C-list page. When you get to that website, we have lots of buttons, but at the top of the page and the very bottom of the page, there are links to book. So that's what you'll be doing. And we actually just released as well some new calculators and diagnostic tools that I think were mentioned a little earlier. So you can have a little fun before or after your session playing around with those just to give you an idea of the actual financial, and they're not all financial actually. Some of them are just kind of organizational impacts of these, different choices and what these decisions look like depending on your actions in the organization. So you can book your time there, play around with the tools, and hopefully start finding the solutions and implementing the fixes if you do have these problems present in your organization today. I also just want to quickly say thank you to Brandy and Naomi and Nikhil. What they brought us today is really what the C-list is all about, which is we want just real experts giving answers directly, no kind of filler and fluff. So I really appreciate all three of you. Thank you so much. And to everyone who joined today, great to have you here. Hopefully you're, going to book a call but even if not, we really just want to help people get moving in building the best organizations and leading the best organizations that they can. So we're really here to just help you succeed. And if we can be a part of that, we'd love to be. So as I mentioned, the recording and the slides will be made available along with a lot of those little kind of tidbits and gifts, whether it's a top 10 questions from Naomi. Nikhil had his 4-week plan for a sprint. And Brandy, I'm spacing, is the slide with the 3. Thank you. Yes, the 3 things to do, the top 3. Thank you so much. All of those will be tools made available to everyone. We hope you use them. We hope you get to work and start fixing things in your own companies and teams to build the best organization possible. And we'd also love your feedback when we do send out all these materials. Love to hear from you if this was valuable, what you'd like to see and hear more about, so that we can look at putting together some other follow-up presentations over the course of the summer. So that's it for us here. And thanks everyone so much for participating. Until next time, wishing you all a great summer, and we hope to see you for our 3rd quarter edition. Thanks so much.